Welcome, everyone. Or maybe one more folks group coming in. Well, just really wonderful to have all of us together today for the annual Lazowski Memorial Lecture. My name is Clint Zweifel, and I'm honored to serve on the Kaplan Feldman Museum Board of Directors. And we also have a few other board members here today that I want to highlight. Vera Emmons, I think, is here. Vera. Nancy Kaiser might be up. And Carol Stanberg may be coming too later, but I just want to thank them for their service. Oh, Greg Yowitz is here. Sorry, Greg. Greg actually is kind of the most important of the group because he chairs the museum. So, but all of these individuals that I'm lucky enough to serve with are just exceptional volunteers, leaders, and committed to doing important work. Also, just wanted to note that we have Representative Herza here today. I just met you. Yeah. So just a note that he is sponsoring a House resolution that is for hearing tomorrow that designates July 11th, Srebrenica Remembrance Day in Missouri. So thank you for that sponsorship of that House resolution. And any museum members here, would you raise your hands? So this is an important thing. Look around you if you do not have your hand raised. And I want you, before you leave today, to ask them why they're members of this important institution. And take a minute to ask them. The programming that happens, all of the investment, not only in the museum, the physical structure itself, but the wonderful outreach work that's happening in this organization is because of those members and their support. So huge thank you to all of them. As you know, in 2025, we commemorate the 30th anniversary of the genocide in Srebrenica, Bosnia and Herzegovina. And we're honored to organize this program with the Srebrenica Remembrance Coalition. Thank you so much for partnering with us on this important program. And I think, as all of you know, St. Louis is the home to the largest Bosnian community outside Bosnia itself. And every St. Louisan in this community has been impacted directly or indirectly by St. Louis Bosnian community. They made our region better, they made it stronger, they made it more robust, and they really are who we are as a community now. And all of us as St. Louisans have a special responsibility to honor what is now part of our region's history too, with our fellow neighbors. And our neighbors' history is our region's history. Today's program will focus on trauma, on resilience, and memory, exploring experiences within both Bosnia and St. Louis. We are lucky at the museum to have an executive director that is just doing a great job leading the team, but also really instrumental in developing the sort of programming that makes us relevant for this larger community, and that's Myron Friedman. Myron, thank you.
Thank you, Clint. Thank you to everyone joining us today for the annual Lazowski Memorial Lecture. We're grateful to our sponsors, our program leaders, Janice Smith and Clint Zweifel, and to Susan Fagenbaum and the Endowment for the Lazowski Lecture on Holocaust and Genocide. Over the years, it has been a grave honor of mine to participate in projects remembering the thousands of victims of the Srebrenica genocide and documenting the unique role of St. Louis as a home for Bosnian refugees. The first was over 20 years ago when I met today's moderator, Patrick McCarthy. We joined with the Bosnian community to connect St. Louisans to the tragic events of the war and to meet their Bosnian neighbors through an exhibit entitled, "We Have to Survive: Bosnian Refugees in St. Louis" at the Missouri Historical Society. And now, as part of the Holocaust Museum team, it is once again a privilege to partner with the Bosnian community in this year's commemoration. The museum is dedicated to sharing difficult histories, to educate, to promote understanding, and to inspire the kinds of change that prevents hatred and brutality. So let's meet our distinguished speakers. Our keynote speaker today is Dr. David Pettigrew, a professor and chair of the philosophy department at Southern Connecticut State University. Dr. Pettigrew serves on the steering committee of Yale University's Genocide Studies program. In 2020, his article, "Mandate Interrupted: The Problematic Legacy of the International Criminal Tribunal for the Former Yugoslavia," appeared in the Washington University Global Studies Law Review. In May 2024, he delivered a lecture at the Swedish Parliament as part of a White Armband Day commemoration. Dr. Pettigrew accompanied the government exhumation team to Visegrad in 2010, witnessing and documenting exhumations on the Drina River. In 2012, he was a credentialed international observer for local elections in Srebrenica and consulted on the creation of the first comprehensive educational museum about the genocide installed at the Srebrenica Memorial Center in 2017. Dr. Pettigrew advocates internationally through open letters and op-ed essays for memorializing victims of genocide and war crimes in Republika Srpska. He also serves as a member of the Connecticut Holocaust and Genocide Education Advisory Committee and was honored in 2024 by the Connecticut General Assembly for his educational efforts regarding the Bosnian genocide. And joining Dr. Pettigrew today is Hasan Hasanovic, a survivor of the Srebrenica genocide who tragically lost his twin brother, father, and numerous family members during the atrocity. For 17 years, Hasan has educated hundreds of thousands of visitors at the Srebrenica Memorial, sharing his story worldwide, including at universities, schools, and parliaments. Hasan is the author of a deeply personal memoir, Surviving Srebrenica, translated into multiple languages, and co-authored Voices from Srebrenica, Survivor Narratives of the Bosnian Genocide. Since 2019, Hasan has led the oral history program at the Srebrenica Memorial Center, conducting over 700 interviews, collaborating with the Shoah Foundation, and co-authoring groundbreaking oral history guidelines with Professor Ann Pertilla from the University of Denver. He holds a master's degree in criminology and is currently pursuing a PhD at the University of Amsterdam. Also joining us today is Elvir Ahmetovic, who was born in Ljubljana, Slovenia, but spent his childhood in the Bosnian town of Srebrenica. During the siege of Srebrenica from 1992 to 1995, Elvir lost several members of his immediate and extended family, including his sister, uncle, and grandfather. When Srebrenica fell in 1995, Elvir, only 14 at the time, survived and reached relative safety in territory controlled by the Bosnian army. In 2002, Elvir immigrated to the United States as a refugee, along with his parents and younger sister, settling here in St. Louis and becoming an active member of our local Bosnian community. He holds a bachelor's degree in history from St. Louis University and a master's degree in late antique and Byzantine studies from King's College, London. Today, he teaches social studies at Normandy School here in St. Louis. And moderating our panel and audience Q&A today is Patrick McCarthy, who has worked closely with the Bosnian community for more than 30 years. In 1994, Patrick traveled to wartime Sarajevo to deliver humanitarian aid, entering the besieged city through a tunnel under the airport. He organized the St. Louis Bosnian Student Project, securing scholarships for Bosnian student refugees at local universities. Patrick is the author of After the Fall, Srebrenica Survivors in St. Louis, a companion volume to an exhibit at the Missouri History Museum, and co-author with Akif Kogo of Bosnian St. Louis, Between Two Worlds. He is an honorary member of the Bosnian-Herzegovinian American Academy of Arts and Sciences and served as an advisor for the traveling exhibit Prijeder, Lives from the Bosnian Genocide, previously shown at our museum. Patrick is professor and associate dean of libraries at St. Louis University, where he directs the Medical Center Library. Can I have a round of applause for our panel and board today? And if you haven't already thought to do so, please quiet your phones. And now I'd like to introduce Dr. David Pettigrew. Welcome.
Greetings. Good to see everyone today. Thank you to the St. Louis Kaplan Feldman Holocaust Museum, the cast of thousands that made today possible. Helen, Kelsey, Cheney, Myron, and Clint, thanks very much to Myron, for that kind introduction. It's good to see old friends in St. Louis, Saib, Edin, Elvir, Damir, and of course, Patrick McCarthy. I think it was Patrick's idea that I try to provide a little context today for our discussion, background and context. And also thanks to the Srebrenica Remembrance Coalition. As mentioned, it's the 30th year since the genocide in Srebrenica, and the historic UN resolution designating July 11th as International Day of Reflection and Commemoration of the 1995 genocide in Srebrenica was also designed. It was passed last year in order to raise awareness about this, the 30th year. So when we say Srebrenica genocide, what do we mean? And what we mean is that the crimes committed at Srebrenica have been judged to be genocide in a number of cases adjudicated by judicial bodies such as the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia and its successor mechanisms and the International Court of Justice. So these are just some examples of cases and judgments. For example, Radovan Karadzic being found guilty of genocide. And so I wasn't going to read the whole thing, but they're sort of representing the idea that there were judgments of genocide against Radovan Karadzic. And also you see here Ratko Mladic found guilty of genocide in the second instance on appeal. And also the International Court of Justice in 2007 stated that the acts committed at Srebrenica falling within Article 2 and A and B of the convention were committed with the specific intent to destroy in part the group of Muslims in Bosnia and Herzegovina as such, and accordingly that these were acts of genocide committed by members of the Army of Republika Srpska in and around Srebrenica from about 13 July 1995. And this ICJ judgment was especially guided by the Krstić judgment, paragraph 37, that said, I think I have it here, that said, the law must not shy away from referring to the crime committed by its proper name. By seeking to eliminate a part of the Bosnian Muslims, the Bosnian Serb forces committed genocide. So this is, in a sense, what we mean when we say that, when we say the Srebrenica genocide, and these are just some of the judgments for genocide owing to the events that were occurring around the week following July 11th, 1995. We also analyzed the Srebrenica genocide commemorated on July 11th as the culmination of over 3 years of aggression against non-Serbs in Bosnia. Srebrenica itself had been under siege for over 3 years. The Serbs and Bosnian Serbs had been undertaking an assault on civilians beginning early in April 1992, including sieges of towns, cities, forcible displacement of civilians, violence against women, using concentration camps, and also undertaking mass executions. The non-Serb populations of towns and municipalities were forcibly expelled. The violence occurred across broad areas of Bosnia, but especially within the territory that was self-named Republika Srpska, or Serb Republic by the Serbs at the time. In other words, there was an effort underway to eliminate non-Serbs in order to achieve ethnic homogeneity. The effect of this eliminationist intent can be seen in Bosnia's comparative census data from 1991 and 2013. I'll just give you a couple of examples where in Visegrad municipality, the Bosnian Muslim population was reduced from 13,500 in 1991 to just 1,000 in 2013. And the numbers have gone down since then for a variety of reasons. In Foča municipality, the census data indicates that the population was reduced from 17,000 in 1991 to about 1,000 in 2013. These are what I call the demographics of genocide. The initial elimination of the population was somewhat successful, and there have been concerted efforts to prevent refugee return. So I just have a couple of slides so you can see the position of Serbia and Croatia relative to Bosnia. That becomes important in what I'm about to talk about, in the sense that there were ultranationalist ideologies operating. One was for Greater Serbia, and one was for Greater Croatia. And Greater Serbia, this is an approximation of Greater Serbia, that Serbian nationalists wanted to claim virtually the entirety of the former Yugoslavia, and call it Greater Serbia. In their view, they're just restoring something, although it never actually existed in this way. And the Croatian nationalists wanted to restore a Greater Croatia, or what they called Herceg Bosna, and this is the area which was sought by Croatian nationalists, and this is the area that was, claimed by Serb nationalists, the Greater Serbia. So this, by speaking about the ideologies from Croatia and from Serbia, I'm reminded that the International Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia developed a legal concept for their prosecutions. It was called the Joint Criminal Enterprise. And the idea was to implicate people who had not actually committed the crimes themselves, but had somehow been involved in supplying those who are planning, directing, supplying those who committed the crimes. So there are a number of cases in which Serbian nationals are identified or Croatian nationals are identified. And the consequence of those judgments and convictions was that these enterprises involved Croatian and Serbian nationals, and were thus led to the conclusion that the armed conflict had an international character. It wasn't just a civil war, as some people have claimed. So the entity of Republika Srpska, so we go back to the entity of Republika Srpska that was declared and then now legitimized as part of the Dayton Peace Accords, was declared within Bosnia in January of 1992 as a kind of microcosm of Greater Serbia. And the leadership of Republika Srpska would carry out atrocities with support from Serbia to achieve ethnic homogeneity from 1992 to 1995, culminating in the Srebrenica genocide. So these crimes, as I mentioned earlier, involved concentration camps. This is Ternopolje in Prijedor municipality. It's a well-known photo from the cover of Time magazine of Fikret Alic in Ternopolje. And this is one lesser-known location in Kalinovic, Barutni magazine concentration camp, where men were taken to be held before they were taken to execution sites. This means it was a military facility. It was the ammunition warehouse. This is Barutni magazine. And then there were sieges of cities and towns. Today is, I would have to mention, today is sort of the symbolic day for the beginning of the siege of Sarajevo, April 6th, from 1992, although people in a peace march were killed while marching in a peace march on April 5th in Sarajevo, for example. But this was, so there was the assault on civilians, and I have here just a slide of a kind of memorial in Sarajevo for the civilians who were killed when the shell fell in this area. You can see it's the shell crater is filled in with a kind of red epoxy. They're referred to as Sarajevo roses. And then next to some of the roses, there are plaques on the wall that explains how many civilians were killed at that site. Can you see that, Patrick, the number? This 40. So this would be August, May 27th. And this is part of a memorial for the children. Over 1,000 children were killed during the siege of Sarajevo. They have both the fountain and also their names on cylinders. In addition to the attack on the siege of Sarajevo, there was attacks on villages with no military value. And this is one in Srebrenica municipality called Klotivac. And it's just evidence that the civilian villages were attacked and homes were destroyed. And most people have been unable to return to their homes because either they're no longer with us or the homes are no longer functional. And then there were murders of the civilians in Visegrad. Here's an indication of where Visegrad is located. This is a house where around 60 women and children were burned alive in May 1992, Srebrenica Street House, and the bridge, the UNESCO World Heritage Site, where people were murdered and thrown into the river, the Drina River in Visegrad. And I think Myron mentioned that I had accompanied the exhumation team in 2010. So I had a couple of slides. I was with the ICMP and the Missing Persons Institute. And I remember they said, Professor, listen up. We have yellow flags for the bones and orange flags for the stuff that blows up. But we ran out of yellow flags, so we used orange flags for everything. And I realized I had to be, careful. And I was trying to document what was going on. And these were the remains of the people who had been killed on the bridge in 1992, who we were now able to find in 2010. And see the teams moving the soil and finding the remains of the victims. Now, in the context of these assaults on civilians, the UN responded in April of 1993 by declaring Srebrenica a safe area. UN Resolution 819. And shortly after that, there were 5 other safe areas named. So this meant that the area was designated as a safe area. You can see the delineation here. And also UN personnel were dispatched to the safe area. So, soldiers volunteered by various countries, I think so. Canada sent soldiers initially to Srebrenica, followed by the Netherlands. But this is what I wanted to ask with you. It's a good time to wonder if this had been declared a safe area and soldiers had been dispatched, why did the genocide take place? One of my friends, Hasan Hasanovic, who was a translator for Dutchbat, would say that it was declared a safe area, full stop. It should be the end of the story. What happened? Why did the genocide happen? Following 3 years of the siege of Srebrenica on July 6th, 1995, Ratko Mladic and his forces moved to overtake the safe area and neutralize the Dutchbat personnel, the Dutch soldiers. Why was the UN mission collapsing? The UN peacekeeping mission had been established by a number of Security Council resolutions. However, with respect to the safe areas, the UN mission was under-resourced and therefore compromised from the beginning. The Secretary General of the UN had chosen to take what he called the light option, as it was it's in quotation marks in his document, with respect to the commitment of military personnel, opting for fewer soldiers. So they wanted 34,000, and then they allocated 7,000. And the idea was that they could call for air support. This was the strategy of the light option. But in the end, only 3,500 were deployed. So that's about 10% of the original plan. And about 400 to 500 were actually in Srebrenica at the time of the fall of the town. So the air support that was promised never came. So it seems further, asking this question, why did the genocide happen, that the people of Srebrenica were betrayed when UN personnel were advised by their leadership, and I'm speaking of the commander, General Rupert Smith, May 29th, 1995, who said that the execution of the mandate to protect the safe areas was secondary to the safety and security of UN personnel. And even more striking was when the Dutch Minister of Defense stated in his so-called Verhoeven instruction, July 10th, 1995, that we have to give priority to the safety of Dutch military personnel. We do not want Dutch personnel to be at risk. So from these statements, it seems that the mission to protect the civilians in the safe area had been abandoned, all but abandoned. Hence, when the Bosnian Serb forces proceeded with their final assault on Srebrenica, the Dutch leadership chose capitulation. Some 15 to 20,000 civilians went through the woods to try to escape, and another 15 to 20,000, these are generally the estimates, proceeded to the UN base expecting to be protected by Dutch UN personnel. Civilians seeking refuge inside the base, as well as those outside the base, were to be forcibly deported on buses toward the town of Milici, and they were had to get off the buses and walk to Kladan. And the Dutch soldiers expelled people from inside the base or observed and assisted as the Bosnian Serb soldiers separated men from the women who were boarding the buses. Now, I had a couple of slides here we probably won't have time for, but this is the UN resolution establishing Srebrenica as a safe area. And then there's also some documents from the Supreme Court of the Netherlands judgment. There was a lawsuit brought by the mothers of Srebrenica referring to the Verhoeven instruction and also talking about the buses that came to take the women, ultimately the women away. And so I've just mentioned that there was this case brought by the mothers of Srebrenica and for all of the victims, but the Supreme Court in the Netherlands found that ultimately that the Netherlands were only responsible for 350 men who had been expelled from the base on July 13th. The court determined that the UN mission had collapsed, so therefore now the command was in the hands of the Dutch government, and it was significant in the sense that it determined that someone was accountable for what happened. However, the Supreme Court ruled that the liability was only 10% of whatever the value was of the lives of the victims. And so, on the one hand, it's positive that someone was found accountable, but I find this inhumanely limited calculation to be difficult to accept. So the town of Srebrenica had fallen. 15,000 or so men are heading north to Tuzla through the woods, being shelled, ambushed, taken into custody for transport to execution sites. And so this was the Srebrenica genocide, that there were these execution sites. One was the Nova Kasaba soccer field, where about 1,000 people were taken, captured and then taken to an execution location in a mass grave. And about 1,000 to 1,500, well, this is Nova Kasaba soccer field. And then you see, I think you can see it on this map. And then another group was taken to Kravica warehouses, these agricultural warehouses in Kravica. Oh, I just have that one slide, so I'll hold it there for a second so you can see that. So they were killed inside the warehouse. And then another execution site was the Pilica Cultural Center. So I don't have time to talk about all of them, but I wanted to give you some representative examples. So this is today. I was there in August to take these photos. And approximately 500 men were taken into this space and then machine gunned to death. And you see the bullet holes throughout the inside of the building. Maybe we can talk about this later, because recently a team from the Srebrenica Memorial Center tried to film inside, and they were not admitted. They were not permitted to film. Now, from these execution sites, the victims were taken to mass graves. So these are part of this genocidal process, because the mass graves were designed to hide the evidence. And so I'm running out of time. So I'll just summarize this idea that there was you can see from this slide that the Serbs went into the primary mass graves and then moved the contents to other sites. So these are called secondary mass graves. And this is a case of someone whose human remains were found in 5 different mass graves. And so they developed a process of identifying each bone in different locations, and then they developed a new language. They called it reassociation, where they put the bones back together, and then the family is given the opportunity to bury their loved ones. So every year on July 9th, the remains that have been identified and the families that have agreed to the burial are brought to Potocari to be kept in the warehouse. And you can see the family members and community members come and help move the coffins into the warehouse. And I wanted to say in my remaining time that I really, one year I was there, and a journalist said, you should go see this process. And when I saw them moving, I think that year it was over 400 coffins into the warehouse, I felt that I couldn't be a spectator. And I joined the line of men moving the coffins into the warehouse. And as the coffins came down the line, we were bearing the weight of each life that was taken from us and the grief of each family. So, you know, the number, let's say 8,372, could be abstract. But to receive and help bring the remains one by one of the victims of the Srebrenica genocide to their final resting place, to bring them home one by one, is something that brings you'd say, the meaning of what happened home to the one who tries to think about it and remembered it. And I try to tell my students about this because I think it's important to understand this. Well, the victims who are identified then and come to the cemetery are buried in a collective janaza, a funeral, on July 11th. And I just have a couple of images from Srebrenica Memorial Cemetery. And I was hoping to have a little time in the remaining minutes of my conclusion to show you these slides. This is Srebrenica Memorial Cemetery, and to mention a little bit about, sort of by way of introduction of Hasan, that the Srebrenica Memorial Center has become the center of gravity for education about the Srebrenica genocide. It plays that leading role in the world for raising awareness. And I have some photos from the Memorial Center. This was, so this is, I apologize, some of the photos have me in them, so I couldn't find photos without me. So you can see some of the exhibit here, the panels that I helped work on. And here's Hasan, who you'll be meeting soon, with one of his exhibits, which involved oral survivor testimony, which is so important. And then Ahmetovic is Ahmetovic Osmanovic, who curated this exhibition about the Death March, which is organized in part around shoes that were found. And here's Ahmetovic and Alma and Amra at the UN last July with an exhibition. the combination of resources. So let me conclude with one issue to raise for you, and that is that these execution sites that I've been talking about, like Kravica and Pilica Cultural Center, these are places where the atrocities have been judged to be part of the genocide convictions for Mladic and Karadzic, right? These are places where the Bosnian Serbs and Republika Srpska have not allowed the survivors to install a memorial of any kind. Also, Pilica Cultural Center, I said that the team from Srebrenica Memorial Center was expelled from the site. So there's no memorial here. The mothers go and lay flowers in the space, which is what I did last August. And I think that the remembering the victims, honoring the memory of the victims, involves respecting and permitting the right to memorialization, a right that's being denied. I just wanted to recall the UN General Assembly resolution in 2022 that condemned Holocaust denial and commended member states who preserve concentration camps for memorials and museums to educate future generations in order to prevent a repetition of the atrocities. So I was hoping that my comments today would be a way that we could dedicate ourselves on the occasion of the remembrance of the Srebrenica genocide to the right to the truth, the right to memorialization, so the victims will never be forgotten and the crimes will not be repeated. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me well? I want to extend my deep gratitude to the St. Louis Holocaust Museum for hosting this event. Thank you, David, for this very important lecture. And what a better place for personal testimony than this museum. So I am deeply grateful for giving me this opportunity to provide my testimony. In the past week or so, I was debating really whether I should have my testimony written and just read or just speak from the heart. So every time I wrote something, it felt impersonal, mechanical, and kind of not what I wanted to project from this podium. So I've decided to go just from the heart and speak as I go. My name is Elvir Ahmetovic. I am one of the Srebrenica genocide survivors. Let me see if I can make this a little taller. Okay. I was born in 1981 in Ljubljana, which was part of Yugoslavia at that time. My parents were working in Ljubljana at the time in Slovenia, but very soon they moved back to Bosnia. I don't even remember Ljubljana at all, or Slovenia. So I remember my childhood only in Bosnia. So we lived in a nearby village close to Srebrenica, a rural area, very modest living. My father worked in a mine, a bauxite mine. My mom worked at home. Since it was a rural area, we had some chicken, a cow, a few animals, live off of my father's income and from that from those animals as well. What they could provide for us. It was a happy childhood. I did not feel that I lacked anything. I was happy. Towards the end of the 80s, I was still a young child, but I was hearing more and more talks about war, the ethnic tensions that were going on in Yugoslavia, and then the war soon started in Slovenia and Croatia. But we really, my parents especially, didn't believe that the war would spread eventually to Bosnia. They had unconditional faith in the Yugoslav army and Tito's ideals of brotherhood and unity. So it was just something incomprehensible for them to even imagine war coming to our doorstep. But little did they know that in few months, war would come to our doorstep. And in 1992, the Serb soldiers, really our neighbors, because in the area where we lived, it was a mixture of Serb and Muslim villages, but we all went to same schools, we all hung out together. So no one could imagine something like that happening. But one day, Serb soldiers, our neighbors, would come to our door, come to our village, and start terrorizing our neighbors, our cousins. On one of those occasions, they would come and demand all people to turn their weapons in, even though no one really had any weapons, except few elderly men who used it for hunting, but that was really all. They took some of my first neighbors and a few of my cousins away, and they never returned. Years later, we found out that they were executed almost immediately as soon as they took them away from our village. At that point, we all knew that we had to run away, we had to flee. So we moved to this remote village about 20 kilometers from Srebrenica, where we were welcomed by a family who lived there. They welcomed us in their, they called it basement really, but it wasn't really a basement. It was a cellar where they kept potatoes and produce for the winter months. It was made of heavy masonry walls, but no windows, nothing. It was completely underground. It resembles these old houses in St. Louis City with those heavy masonry walls, but very low ceilings, except there were no windows. So, but at least it was something for us. We lived there. We lived off of charity, really, of the host who provided a basement for us and the neighbors around. We would oftentimes go work in the fields, pick hay, pick corn, or whatever was in the season, and in return we would get some food from the owners of those fields, and that's how we survived. But in a sense, it was still a very communal feeling, a feeling of solidarity among us. We know we were all together in this predicament. When the bombardments would go on pretty much every day, half of the village would gather in that little cellar because that was the safest place to be. We would pack like sardines in there, and for hours, sometimes a whole day, while the bombardment was going on. But we lived, and it was a miserable existence, but we were all together, and that was all that mattered for us. As I mentioned, my mom and me, my father, and my little sister Mirella, that's her over there. I apologize. So we would go help the neighbors work in the field. On those days when the Serbs were not shooting at us, sometimes we would go during night because under cover of night you can actually pick hay, pick corn, and work in a relative safety. But one of those days, there was a period of lull in shooting, really, from the Serbs' positions. For several days they did not shoot, so people tend to get a little more relaxed. So one of those days, my mom and Mirella went to help the neighbors, but I, for some reason, stayed. And my father, who worked in his improvised blacksmith workshop where he fixed people's axes and horseshoes and whatnot. But they went to the field to help the neighbors, and very soon we hear the explosions and screaming of people coming from that direction, and immediately I knew something was wrong, of course. I ran towards. towards the place, and I see my mom coming towards me, completely torn apart, holding her intestines in her hands, literally, telling me that Mirella was dead. So I just fell on the ground, and I don't even remember anything after that. But my mom was taken to Srebrenica, to hospital, where no one really gave her any chances of surviving. But luckily, there was a visiting surgeon from Tuzla, town of Tuzla at that time, who, with his expertise, he patched her up somehow, and she miraculously survived. But that was the most difficult part of our lives, most difficult moment of our lives. And for days on and weeks, I would relive her death, because I would dream that she was alive. And once I woke up, I realized the reality was totally something different and grim. So it was very difficult, especially for my mom, who couldn't attend Mirella's funeral because she was in the hospital. But life went on. We have to move on. So after that, we gathered ourselves, continued living in those miserable conditions. And then sometimes during that time, our grandparents joined us in that little room. There was just one room, really, and two of their sons. So there were 7 of us living there at that time. Year of 1993 was the year of starvation, really. All of the reserves of food were gone. Even the people from the village who owned the fields, who welcomed us there, they ran out of food as well. So we were all pretty much starving. Sometimes we would go several days without eating, or eating very minimal amounts of food. I remember my neighbor bringing me a little, occasionally, a little pancake of a corn flour, just this big, and giving it to me and my mom. So she would put it on a stove top and cook it and give it to me. So I would have some food. Hygiene was minimal. We were all infested with lice. Wouldn't take showers for weeks sometimes, especially during winter time. Summertime was easier. You can bathe yourself outside in a creek or in a river, whatever is available. But in the winter time, that was not an option. I'll stop here for a second because I forgot to just give you a little context here. So that is Mirella. That's the only surviving picture of her. Srebrenica fell in 1995. My mom did not gather the photos or pictures, so this is the only one surviving. And this is then in I believe it was winter of 1993, or I might be wrong, but one of my uncles also got killed. He was killed by a Serb fire from the nearby position, in a similar way, like my sister died. And that was another shock for the whole family, for his parents. It was just an endless chain of events that seemed each one seemed more horrible than the one before. in addition to all the other things, we had to deal with these tragedies almost on a daily basis. If someone from our family wasn't killed or injured, we certainly knew a lot of people from neighborhood almost on a daily basis being injured, killed, massacred, and the bombardments, as I said, were almost on a daily basis. So you learn how to live with that. You hear the grenade in the air. Usually that's a good sign because it's flying over, it's going someplace else. But if you don't hear it, then it's a problem because it will hit nearby, very nearby. So, but you just move on. It becomes your daily reality, and you make the best of it. 1994, we had a bit of good news because my sister Alma, which is in this picture, all the way to the right, was born. Was not a best time, but still it was a really blessing for my parents. They had her. From the very beginning, she was very sickly looking baby, barely surviving. We almost had no food. Only through the really goodwill of our neighbors and their charity did we manage to keep her alive, and ourselves for that matter as well. She was malnourished. She had this huge belly, typical sign of malnourished children, with her legs and arms just bone, skin and bone, that's all. We ourselves were malnourished. My father lost almost all of his teeth. They just started falling out for the lack of nutrition. Little wounds, for example, if you get a scratch, I would get scratched like by a branch or something, and it would take weeks to heal. Something that heals usually in a day or two, it would take weeks to heal those little wounds. Again, it was just lack of nutrition that we all suffered from. But 1994 was a little better than the 1993, the year of starvation. Some of the humanitarian aid started coming through, so there was a little bit more food. Things were looking better. The prospects of brighter future seemed to be there. But very soon we would all get disappointed again. In the year of 1990, how many times do I have? About 5 minutes or so? 2 minutes only, okay. So in 1995, as we all know, as we all heard from Dr. Pettigrew's lesson, the Serbs decided to take over Srebrenica, even though it was a protected zone by the UN. Able-bodied men and younger men, 17, 18, decided to go run for safety through the woods and reach the free territory, whereas civilians, women, children, and elderly decided to go to this place called Potocari. Very close to Srebrenica, a few kilometers from the town of Srebrenica. We all gathered there, and my family and I went. My mother, my sister, my grandparents, and I went there, whereas my surviving uncle and my father, they went through the woods. They trying to reach freedom that way. We got to Potocari, and that was complete chaos, complete utter chaos, and people in panic, children crying, women crying. I did not see any atrocities personally there, but I've seen women crying, running completely out of their minds because they witnessed some of the Serb soldiers killing people in the fields, in the nearby fields. But I myself have to say that I did not see that. So on that day, we decided to get through the crowd and reach one of the buses that was designated to transport all of us to nearby to Tuzla region. My grandfather was terrified, so he decided to stay behind. He said, "You go on, and I will catch up with you guys." So that's what we did. We started making our way towards the trucks and buses. It was a mixture of trucks and buses. We got on a truck, really. So we got on there and reached Tuzla region all in one piece, but unfortunately my grandfather never made it. We saw footage of him some years later, where Serb soldiers actually are separating him from the civilians. He was 60 years old at the time. He was a civilian. He did not carry arms. He did not fight in the war. So, and only, I think recently, about 5 years ago, they have discovered his remains, his partial remains, and he was buried a few years ago at the memorial site at Potečari. But I will wrap up here. We lived for a few years in the Tuzla region and then moved to Sarajevo after the Dayton peace agreement. And due to circumstances, economic circumstances, we could not go back to Srebrenica. Our house was destroyed. We really didn't have any options, so we applied for a refugee visa to come to the United States, like many other Bosnians, and it was granted, and we ended up living in St. Louis here. We have extended family here as well. So there was a huge help for us to help us start a new life in this new country and in the state of Missouri. Just in conclusion, I want to say thank you for giving me this opportunity to share my testimony, to share what I have been through, especially in the face of these recent denials and revisionist attempts by the politicians from Serbia and Republika Srpska to reshape the narrative, to own the narrative of what happened in Srebrenica. I know it has been 30 years since the genocide, but it is as relevant as it had happened last week or yesterday. So thank you for giving us this opportunity. It is really important that we survivors speak about this and do not allow the revisionists to own the narrative and snatch it from us. Thank you so much. And I apologize for this, a bit of an emotional testimony. Thank you.
Friends, we are now going to be joined by Hasan Hasanovic, who is joining us from Bosnia.
Hello. Hello, everyone. It's difficult now to speak after Elvir. So my name is Hasan Hasanovic. I grew up in a small village not far from Srebrenica. I had two brothers. One of my brothers was my twin. I was just 5 minutes older than him. His name was Hussein. The younger brother was 4 years younger than us. His name is Omer. We lived in this beautiful village. My childhood was really perfect. My father and my grandfather used to work in Croatia and were really good providers for our family. So as me and my brothers and my mother and grandmother were working the fields, I also had two grandparents, parents of my mother in the same village. So I could always go and visit them and just go and help them out and enjoy them as well. And it was a really, really beautiful life. I was playing a lot and going to school and did a lot of hiking when going to school, which was really, really difficult, especially in the winter. But I don't complain. We had everything. The only problem was the road infrastructure. Anything else was really good. Our house was beautiful. Whatever my father and my grandfather used to earn, make, they would invest in our house. We also built another house in the town near Srebrenica in Bratunac, which is another municipality, but very close to Srebrenica. where we actually moved couple of years before the start of the war. So I could see the war coming through television, through radio. I was able to watch the news, even though I was a child. But I was really interested, and you know, when the war is about to happen, even though you are a child, you get much mature and you get serious, and this is how I really was able to comprehend everything what was going on. The hatred was really hitting the roof, and the nationalism, and then it was us and them. The propaganda was really powerful from the Serb side, from the Milosevic, from the Belgrade. So we knew, actually I knew, and I was able, as I said, even as a child, to figure out that us Muslims, Bosniaks, were in a big trouble because we had no weapons, and nobody was out there to defend us if the war starts. And we knew that our neighbors were fully armed, that Milosevic was arming them. Basically, when I moved to Bratunac to continue my education, and the same was on with my brothers, spent just short time there, and also I could see that the war was coming in Bratunac, because Serbia was also very close to just across the river Drina, which is a national border between these two states. And I could see the movement of the military, of the Serb, of course, military. And then all of a sudden, our Serb neighbors would not talk to us. They just as if we did not exist anymore. So people started to run for their lives, and massively were leaving Bratunac and Srebrenica, and all these places where Bosniaks, Muslims lived as a majority, and because they were afraid of Serbia, of Milosevic, and of the Milosevic army. So unfortunately, we did not leave for safety towards Tuzla. We stayed, and one day our house was rounded up. Soldiers came searching for our house, allegedly looking for weapons, because they knew that my father worked in Croatia and had some visits of his friends from Croatia. And luckily, they did not kill my father there. We escaped. We had to cross a checkpoint. At the checkpoint near my house, our neighbors, Serb neighbors, stood guard. And I was really afraid that they would take away my father, and they didn't. And then we kept running from one village to the other, where my father had two sisters in both of the villages where we actually were going for safety. And then eventually, you know, we ended up in Srebrenica, because we heard that resistance happened in Srebrenica town by the side of the Bosniaks, so that we could go there. We hiked for really long distances for a couple of days. So we came to Srebrenica. The town was empty. The Serb forces abandoned the downtown. Some houses were burned down, and we moved in the building where my uncle had an apartment. So he and his family already left because of the upcoming war. They went to Tuzla for safety. So we moved in his empty apartment. So everything was there. Only a few things were taken from thieves, but the most of the things were still there. And there was still electricity at the time, which was cut off a couple of weeks later. So the beginning of the war was not that difficult, but for my family it was very difficult, because my grandmother died, and my grandfather died on the father's side in the village where I grew up. So it was difficult for my father. He went there. Really, it was difficult for him. He had to take care of our two cows and the food, because we knew that we will need food later. We actually could anticipated that the starvation was coming because of the war. Srebrenica was put under the siege. And basically, I went to the village from Srebrenica where I grew up. I hiked for 3-4 hours. When I got there, it was so sad for me to see my village totally destroyed, burned down to the ground by our Serb neighbors. And my neighbors from the village lived in the forest on the edge of the village. They built huts. They were huts for animals on one side and huts for them as human beings on the other side. I lived there for 2 months. It was really dangerous. During the daylight, I had to hide from the shooting from nearby Serb position, and also there was shooting from, as Dr. Pettigrew mentioned, Klotjevac. It is near the river Drina and Serbia. So from Serbia, from a real high mountain, they were constantly shooting at us. They knew that the resistance was happening there, and they knew that the civilians were working the fields and trying to survive. So long story short, there was a situation where I was going to collect some corn flour with a neighbor, and I was being shot at from the Serb position, and I barely survived the attack. We had the corn flour on the animal cart, and by some miracle I survived the attack, and that was the first thing for me to confront with big fear of possibly being injured or killed. And because of this, I moved out from the forest. My father told me and my 2 brothers to go to the safety back to Srebrenica in the apartment of my uncle. So there was a young woman. She was cooking for us while my parents were still in the village, living in the forest with 2 cows and with the neighbors. And then they were attacked, and everybody, animals were killed, and everybody had to leave the forest, and they were bringing food to Srebrenica. So all of a sudden, we were all together in Srebrenica. They brought food, they brought some belongings, and basically, that was the peak of the starvation in Srebrenica. January, February, and the March of 1993. So many civilians coming to find a shelter in Srebrenica because of the ongoing offensive by the Bosnian Serb forces against the enclave, trying to shrink the size of the enclave of Srebrenica. So many refugees were coming, and it was such a chaos in town. And we were hoping to be protected by the international community, by the United Nations. So then French General Philippe Morion arrived. That was the 10th of March 1993. And in front of a huge crowd in Srebrenica from the post office building, he addressed and promised protection on the behalf of the United Nations for Srebrenica people. I was there, and I was happy to hear this news. So basically, there was a lull, there was a ceasefire, and food started to arrive, humanitarian supplies, unlike period before where we starved to death, everybody. And the wounded and the sick were being transported to Tuzla. And one day I went to the playground to play football, thinking that there was a ceasefire, that they would not shoot. That was a big mistake of my life, one of the biggest mistakes. I got to the concrete playground. My friends were there, and two groups of boys were playing football, and me and my group, we were waiting for our turn to play, and we would play with the winning team. And as I sat on the first bleacher watching this game of boys I knew, I heard explosions rolling across Srebrenica, and all of a sudden, in front, like just 2 meters in front of me, I saw a black smoke, and an explosion happened, and I fainted, and I didn't know for a few minutes. I was numb. I was unconscious. When I woke up, there was a smoke around me. Everybody was screaming, crying. I saw blood puddles. Some of my friends were beheaded. I could see arms and legs torn apart. And I was under big shock, and I literally just somehow ran away from the place to a nearby house, and I hid in a basement. And uh, long story short, it's difficult to remember these moments, and I speak every year almost in Srebrenica on during these commemorations at the playground. A few years ago, we put up a memorial plaque. It was put up by the mothers of Srebrenica, unlike all the attempts from Serb authorities not to allow it to be put there. So 74 people were killed, and over 100 were killed during the massacre, mostly teenagers. One of the biggest crimes of the Bosnian War, and nobody was brought to trials and held accountable for these crimes. So this, I thought, I survived this. It is just the end of my troubles, but sadly, that was just the beginning. I will skip many moments because of our time. United Nations arrived. Srebrenica was proclaimed as a safe UN area. Canadian soldiers, Dutch soldiers came in July 1995, in spite of the UN the status of Srebrenica as a safe area, in spite of the presence of the Dutch UN soldiers. Srebrenica fell into the hands of the Bosnian Serb forces, and I ran with my family. Half of my family went to Potocari, my mother, my younger brother, and grandparents, parents of my mother, and we barely could say goodbyes. My twin brother, my father, and my uncle took the other way over the hills in the notorious event known as the Death March. At the very beginning, when the shooting started on July 12th, around the midnight, after the midnight, around that time, I lost the sight of my loved ones, and I never ever saw them again. I am the only one who survived. So I spent the additional 5 days, 5 nights being hunted like an animal by soldiers. Did not sleep for at least 6 nights. Did not have food. Water was also a problem. I mean, there are no words to describe these horrific events. I have written a memoir about this, and also another book published in the United States. So long story short, on the July 16th, 1995, I made it to the Free Territory. I was barely alive. I was half dead, like the majority of the survivors who made it. Only 3,500 survivors, men and boys, reached the Free Territory, unlike majority who were taken into the custody and taken to the execution sites, which were named by Dr. Pettigrew and killed. Basically, later many years later, I found out that the day when I survived, my father was killed, and the day before I survived, my twin brother was killed. My twin brother was killed in Kozluk on the garbage disposal, where 1,000 men and boys were killed. Nobody survived. Very close to the river Drina, just a few meters. And my father was killed in Pilica, in Pilica Cultural Center, which Dr. Pettigrew showed you the picture, and nobody actually survived the Pilica massacre as well. So long story short, I went back to school, went to the university. After graduation, I came to Srebrenica to work for the memorial. I also wanted to help myself because of my trauma. I buried my father in 2000. In 2003, I came on the bus in a convoy of buses coming from Tuzla. Family members who were coming to attend the funeral and to bury their loved ones. When we got to Bratunac, which is really close to the cemetery, Serb police, the authorities, told us to get out. So because of the alleged traffic jam, we had to walk all the way to the cemetery, like two miles. And on the side of the streets, there were Serbs, hundreds of Serbs, local Serbs, as spectators, chanting, yelling, calling names, insulting us, calling us animals, Turks, spitting on us. They were spitting at me while I was going to bury my father. And I have no words to describe how I felt as a human being, totally humiliated. And still, I buried my father that day. And 2 years later, I buried my twin brother, which was the most difficult day of my life. I spent literally 5 months just preparing for his burial. And I thought honestly that I would not survive it. So when on the day, I did not eat for days, my heart was racing, I had to put his bones in the grave by my hands because I was the oldest surviving male according to our tradition. I honestly thought that I would not get out from that grave. I would stay with him there. Who would think that after only 4 years later that I would come back to that place and started to work there. And I spent 11 years working as a curator, educating hundreds of thousands of visitors, and then additional 5 years developing the oral history program. And I filmed over 700 survivors probably in the best oral history program after the Shoah Foundation project. It is my honor. So I spent years and years sharing my experience at university schools. And tomorrow, just yesterday, I came from Amsterdam, where I presented oral history project there. And I'm also starting my PhD at the University of Amsterdam on oral history. And I'm going tomorrow to Ljubljana to open an exhibition which I curated with my colleague. So here I am after almost 30 years talking to you. In July 1995, I was hunted. I was, very skinny 19-year-old boy, and half of my family was killed. And I have to tell you that they did not win. The perpetrators, we won. We won. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Hasan, and for your very powerful, very moving testimony. I should point out, it is almost 11:30 at night for Hasan. It's very late there in Bosnia, and we appreciate the extra effort you made to be with us today. So this is why memory matters. And I want to thank especially Elvir for your courageous and very moving testimony today. It takes a lot out of you, I know, both you and Hasan, to have to relive these experiences. And we really appreciate it. And we remember and honor the sacrifices that you made and the family members that you have lost. Finally, to David, thank you for your dedication, your incredible commitment to the cause of remembrance for Bosnia and Herzegovina generally, and particularly for the genocide in Srebrenica. So we've heard from these very powerful and moving speakers. And now I would invite you to ask whatever questions you would have of them. And Helen has a microphone and can move around. And the gentleman in the blue, if you'd like to begin. Thank you.
Friends, please do wait for the microphone, otherwise Hasan cannot hear you. So if people could help me out and pass down.
Yes, thank you so much for your very moving remarks. I traveled in the region last summer and talked to some Serbs, and I'm just wondering, did they ever come to terms with what they've done? And did they ever come to terms with any lessons learned from that terrible period?
What had occurred in 1995 and throughout the entire war. They seem to have a completely different idea of what had happened. And although some of them do acknowledge that a crime happened, but they always condition that with, they qualify it with, well, it was a retribution for the crimes that the Muslims committed against the Serb civilians in the area. But very few have really come out and honestly said that and acknowledged what had happened and recognized the true magnitude of the crime.
They deny the genocide. Well, use the mic, because I think the other mic is on, but there's no feedback, so it's okay, right? One of the phenomena that I was going to talk about in my presentation, we ran out of time at the end, is that the convicted war criminals are glorified throughout Republika Srpska. In the town of Hasanovic, where you saw the concentration camp, Borutny magazine, where no memorial is allowed, there's a 12-foot tall mural of Ratko Mladic, who was convicted of genocide. And it's at the entrance to the town, and there's an inscription on it that says, "Town of the Hero." Grad Heroi, and there's another sign that says "Welcome to Kalanovic." But that's just one example of in Bratunac there was a banner over the road with Ratko Mladic and Milorad Dodik wishing them a happy birthday and a long life. And banners sometimes appear around Srebrenica on July 11th with Ratko Mladic's image, and the inscription is. July 11th is Srebrenica Liberation Day. So but one of our friends who's been here, Haris Halilovic, developed an analysis where he said it's gone beyond denial to celebration, to triumphalism. So that's they're often described. The perpetrators are described as brave defenders of the homeland or of the defensive war, the homeland war.
So I have to add, the problem is that the Serb elites have never confronted with confronted with their past. They have never admitted the crimes, and basically they have never given up on the ideology of the Greater Serbia and the Milosevic regime. Unlike the Germans after the Second World War. So this is why we have political revisionism we have a historical revisionism, and we also have the denial of the genocide and other war crimes in Bosnia. And they even use public funds, Republika Srpska and Serbia, Republika Srpska in particular, to deny the genocide. And the Memorial Center is tracking this. And since 2020, we are publishing annual genocide denial reports where we identify who does it and how. And it was established by the High Representative as a criminal felony in the Bosnian Criminal Code. Whoever denies the genocide, and now the denial of the genocide has decreased, even though they are trying to use different dynamics to continue.
Thank you. And I think the gentleman here in the front had a question.
Professor, you made a brief reference in your remarks to a story that we heard when we were in Sarajevo some years ago about the tunnel underneath the airport that provided humanitarian aid. Am I correct, if I remember correctly, that it existed with the knowledge of both sides and was allowed to continue? Can you elaborate a little bit on that tunnel and what it did and did not do for the both sides?
I'm not sure it was. I'm not sure it was in my remarks, but it's true that it was designed and built by leading architects in Sarajevo, and it was the only lifeline. It had a oil pipe, and people were able to go through at some risk because the Serbs knew where the entrance and the exit were, and they would shell that, so people would wait to go through. So it was a kind of heroic phenomenon that was created, and people would go through the tunnel. I mean, I was talking to the former director of the National Library, and he believe hard to believe, but during the siege he went to Paris for a conference, and he managed to go through the tunnel and then run across the runway and take the flight. And he said what he could never believe is that he went back to the city during the siege. He was committed to Sarajevo and staying there. I don't know if that helps, but it was a real.
No, but if I may add just another detail, we also visited the site a few years ago when we went to visit Bosnia. But the entrance to the tunnel was actually inside a house, so the Serbs didn't exactly, they couldn't pinpoint where the location of the entrance is. They knew it was somewhere in the neighborhood, but they never really discovered where the entrance is. The UN knew, but they just turned a blind eye to it. Really, they knew it was a lifeline for Sarajevo, so they just pretended they didn't know, but they knew the tunnel existed, and Serbs knew it existed, but they just couldn't pinpoint to the exact location. So yeah, it's a remarkable story.
And we're going to take just 2 more questions, please.
Okay, and I'll just add to that because I went through that tunnel in 1994 on my way in and out of Sarajevo, and what has been said is very true. It was inside of a house. You went down to the basement of a house to get into the tunnel. It was very dangerous going both directions, and because Sarajevo at the time was under siege, the reason the airport tunnel was dug was as people were trying to escape from Sarajevo, the UN not only blocked them, but actually illuminated with the lights when people were running across the tarmac of the airport so that Serb snipers had a way to kill those people. So this was literally a lifeline that had been dug underneath the Sarajevo airport. Who has a question next? These gentleman and lady here.
Hasan, I'm Jan Goldman, and my son is, I think, on a bus to see you. I don't know whether it's tonight or tomorrow morning. So I'm just very, very excited.
Yes, I know. Yeah, he's coming. I know. Thank you.
I know, and I just want to, it's just such an honor to see you and meet you and tell your story.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So you can tell him hello.
Yes, I will.
Well, I tell you hello here. And thank you again.
Thank you.
So this is going to be our
I
final
work with
question.
many veterans at the VA with post-traumatic stress disorder. I wonder about you survivors. Have you encountered this kind of phenomenon?
Well, sorry. Well, I've already mentioned that in the days immediately following the death of my sister, I had these recurring dreams of her being alive and her death just being not true, but every day waking up to the reality. But then the dreams went away. What I have noticed, and I have heard that from many people also, in the recent years, I'm starting to have dreams of us running away from the Serbs, being surrounded or circled by them, and about to be killed or caught. So I'm not sure if they're increasing in frequency, but in the last 4 or 5 years, definitely I have had those dreams. Whereas maybe when I was younger, not so much. So, and I know my parents also have mentioned that phenomenon, that as they're growing older, they're having more of these dreams, these paranoias of being caught by the Serbs and killed or massacred. So yeah, I have had those. I hope they don't increase in frequency in the following years.
Is there survivor's guilt like a lot of the veterans from Vietnam?
Yes, yes, always, always. You always ask yourself, why wasn't that person saved, or why is it just for me to survive, but my sister, who was only 4 years at the time, not? She was completely innocent. She never knew what was going on around her, and she just died like that. And you ask yourself these questions, these existential questions all the time, but there is no really answer. There's not a good answer to these questions. Yeah. So, of
So
course,
similar to
Yeah.
to Elvir, I'm sorry, maybe I interrupted you.
no, go ahead.
Yeah, I basically, if you remember, in storytelling, I said that I moved to Srebrenica. One of the reasons is to basically help myself to cope with my trauma. You know, for years I had these dreams of being attacked and hunted and could not run from the soldiers, and I would, you know, get up and my heart would race, and this stopped by time, especially probably because you know, I was retelling these stories at the memorial, you know, on daily basis, and I was focusing on others. And later I used EMDR. I had therapies as because I started recording survivors, so I had to have an extra support because it was really difficult to live with much my trauma, and I was taking on a lot of other traumas from other survivors hearing basically on the daily basis when we were filming them, and it is a stigma. The survivors, there is no institutional help. Actually, there is, but you have to pay. It is very expensive. So everybody, people, basically survivors, they hide. They have this problem. Only they deal with this problem within their families. So it is a big problem. So I'm trying at the memorial and elsewhere to work and to raise awareness that survivors need support, that they need free services regarding treating their trauma. But I don't know if that will happen.
Summer program in Srebrenica, who was a survivor. His name was Shemso Osmanovic, and he was with his mother and was allowed to get on the bus to be deported, in a sense. So the soldiers were making decisions. It's described by Dutch officers as a cross between Schindler's List and Sophie's Choice. As people would approach the buses, some would be taken away and to be killed, and others would be allowed to get on the bus. So Shemso told me one time that he got on the bus, but it was just luck, and he can never forget the faces of the children who were not allowed to get on the bus. So that haunts him to this day, and he's thrown himself into a kind of interfaith dialogue. It's a kind of focus for him. So people find things to work on without traditional psychotherapy. It's a kind of a working cure, and so he's working hard on Muslim Jewish interfaith understanding.
Give me. Now that you mentioned Shame, so I actually was in a very similar situation. at the point when we reached the buses, actually in our case, it was a truck, and there were Serb soldiers standing by and letting people on. So I was a tallish boy, 14-year-old boy, and my mom was terrified of what was about to happen. So one of the soldiers actually picked me out of the crowd because I was tall, and as he called me forward, and at that point, to be honest, I myself did not feel scared. Maybe it was a state of shock or something, but he called on me. I came up front, and he then tells me to get on the truck to help the ladies and women and children to get their luggage and what they had on the truck. But my mom later recalled, and she always mentioned this moment, that she just completely just lost it at that moment because she thought that I was being taken away. But the soldier, he was, I think he was a good-hearted guy, really. He didn't care. He just wanted everyone on the truck, so that was a pure luck. But I heard the story a few days later because the evacuation lasted not just that day, but a couple days after July 11. So I've heard stories that after that initial phase, they started taking off boys and separating boys my age, 14, 13 years of age, separating them from their families and executing them. But I was lucky enough maybe that I was evacuated that first day.
So I just want to thank our speakers once again for their very powerful and moving testimony. And Helen Turner has some concluding remarks for the program today.
Thank you very much. And could we please thank Patrick, who really put all of this group of people together. If you could please give him a really warm thank you. So I also wanted to thank our remarkable speakers, Dr. David Pettigrew, Hasan Hasanovic, and Elvir Ahmetovic. Thank you so much for sharing so much of yourselves with us. My name is Helen Turner. I'm the Director of Education here at the museum. And while I had a little bit more to say, I think the only thing I can really think that's meaningful to say is that during these presentations, I just heard so many echoes of what we hear from Holocaust survivors, the stories, the pain, but also the tremendous resilience. You both took my breath away. And thank you so much for sharing so much of yourself with us. As David said about carrying the weight of the coffins, we will carry the weight of your words, and we too will be witnesses to the love that you had for the people that you've lost, and we will keep them with us. So this is just the beginning of a series of commemorative events. We invite you to join us with the St. Louis Symphony Orchestra on Monday, June 2nd at 7 o'clock for a program titled Bosnian Journeys, and we have a flyer about it over in the corner. And the same is true for Thursday, July 10th, where we will be at the History Museum for a film screening of Sevap Mitzvah and Quo Vadis Aida. And this is, of course, all for the run-up of the official genocide commemoration, which will be on July the 11th. You can also join the museum on April 27th at Temple Israel for our Yom HaShoah program. That is Holocaust Remembrance Day. It's our Holocaust Remembrance event. And I think this year, especially as I think of all of the people in the room, the shared experiences that we have, this event feels very important to me as we are both talking about Holocaust survivors, and we'll have a Holocaust survivor speaking, but also that we will have Elvir Pasic, who is a Bosnian survivor, light the candle for the other genocides that we commemorate on that evening. So I truly believe we are all a community here, no matter what brings us or what paths we come from. But we're all here to remember the pain of other people and to bear witness to that pain to ensure it does not happen again. So with that, I invite you all to take a deep breath in and a deep breath out, because these are some heavy topics. And until we meet again, please be well, be safe, and we hope to see you soon. Thank you.
I've heard that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well done, sir.
Oh, they did a great job. This was great.
Reminds me of Gloria's story.
Yeah. And Jerry Kennedy got hit underneath a barn as well. Yeah. It's in the exhibits.
Eerily similar. George, in your House Committee resolution,
Thank you.
consent calendar, can that go?
Hello again. Thank you for joining us.
Well, we've been there. We've been
That's
through
what I
the
heard you
time. Yeah,
say,
we've
yeah.
been all through that era.
Wow.
One of the best trips we ever took, because we did it, you know, everybody cruises down the Adriatic to Dubrovnik. We did it with a car and a driver.
And a guy.
And started in a guide, starting in Trieste,
Uh-huh.
coming down the coast of Dubrovnik, about 2.5 weeks.
Ah.
It was fabulous.
Yeah, sounds like it. Yeah, yeah, you've seen so much.
It'd be the next museum trip.
Yeah, that's a good one.
So friends, just a gentle reminder that the museum closes in 9 minutes. The museum closes in 9 minutes. If you could please make your way into the lobby. Thank you.
Yana finally came out. He's been holding up track.